Um, Hi everyone. It's 7:15. Think some anyone from online. Welcome to Ruby Tuesday. KL number 95 and Penang 44 and also KL Elixir meetup. Think on the venue itself. We'll wait for a bit when for everyone to get into the hall in Mindvalley. Before we get started with our talk. Is anyone in the hall right now? Mind Valley Hall. Um, Testing, testing. We'll
Testing
get
one, two,
set
three.
started very
Testing
soon.
one, two, three. Nice. cake.
Is everyone in?
Hello?
Hello, hello. Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Is everyone in the hall or still
Not
need
yet,
some?
not yet. Not yet.
Not yet.
They are still eating.
Okay. Let's give them some time. Let's say we start in for another 5 minutes. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Fadil, can you hear me? Awesome.
Yep. I think we can start with some introduction and housekeeping. So, welcome everyone to Ruby Tuesday KL number 95, Penang number 44, and also KL Elixir meetup. So, uh, proudly brought to you by KLXRB. So, these are the links to the Facebook group, our meetup link, and also Slack invites if you want to join the Ruby invites. So I'm Gui, I'm based in Penang. I'm also a Ruby developer and also co-organizer with Tristan here. Um, so yeah. So we will be inviting our first speaker, Bruno. Let me get Bruno in. Hi. Hi,
Hello.
Bruno.
Hi, Gui.
So
Hi, everyone.
So I guess we can we can get started. Bruno will talk about Mikado approach, how to untangle the mess and move forward. So yeah, let Bruno start.
Okay, thank you very much, Gui. It's a pleasure to be here. Hi, folks. I'm talking from Tallinn, Estonia. As you know, like one of the cameras that you see there is in the Mindvalley Hall of Awesomeness. What some of you might not be aware of is that there's also a Mindvalley office in the other side of the world, like here in Estonia, and I'm talking from my home that is very close to it. And I'm excited that in some time I'm moving to Malaysia as well. So you should expect to see me in person eventually over there. Yeah, I'm going to try taking over the presentation. Let's see if this works. Here I'm going to share my entire screen.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yep.
Great.
Okay, there we have it. Cool. So let me move you folks to the other side so I can see you. Yeah, cool. Okay, let's go into this. What I'm going to share with you, folks, is something that is very simple, and it's not specific for Ruby. It's not specific for Elixir. It's an approach that you can take whenever you're faced with a problem that might be a bit complicated, let's say like entangled, and how you can untangle the mess and make very pragmatic, sane progress so that you see that you're not making your problem worse and worse, but actually you're taking incremental steps to make it better. So it's the Mikado approach. Now, first, who am I? My name is Bruno. I am a web developer at Mindvalley. I've been working for Mindvalley for the past 2 years. Most of the time, all of the time, like based here in Europe. Now I'm relocating to KL and starting a new journey over there. Apart from my work at Mindvalley, I'm also a certified life coach, also by Mindvalley, and I empower tech leaders like to challenge assumptions, rewrite their beliefs, and become the best version of themselves. And yeah, I am interested in lots of topics, not only about programming, but also a lot about personal growth. So if you ever see me around while I'm in KL, just talk to me, ask me what I'm reading or something like that. Cool. So let's tell a common scenario. And every once in a while, you might find yourself in preparing yourself to do a task, and then you start, and you know what needs to be done. And then when you start making the change, it seems easy enough. But then when you make a little change in something, there's another part that you notice, oh, wait a bit, I need to change that thing as well. And then you go ahead and you make that new small change that was necessary. But when you make that other small change, then other 3 things you find out that need to be changed as well. And then, okay, let's go and fix those things. And then for each one of them, you see that the situation is you're getting more invested in the situation. It's hard to just like look back and say that, oh, never mind. And you basically find yourself into an entangled mess that you end up sometimes asking yourself like, hey, what is it that I was trying to do anyway? And sometimes the situation gets so complicated that it just like give up and go like do something else. I know that this happened with me. Like sometimes when you realize that you start changing something, then you see, oh, we need to change that. They need to change that other thing, and eventually say, oh, never mind. Let's just give up on this, and I'll go back to this problem in the future. And what I'm going to share with you folks is exactly how you can go back to this in the future. And why is it messy, really, the situation? Is because first, when we start with the problem, we are not aware of how things will break. Or when we start to tackle the task, we do not know what are the changes that are going to be necessary to make. And when we're piling one change on top of the other, it gets really hard to stop halfway through. Because as you're changing things, your application environment, the development environment that you are, is probably not runnable because you're changing so many things, and then it's hard to get it into a stable environment that can even make your tests run properly. And another thing that happens is that once you start to touch all these different things, you end up touching many different files. And we're changing many files at the same time. You create like a bad experience for whoever is going to review your code, see the changes, even yourself in the future when you're going through and seeing what it is that you did, it becomes like harder to do. So what is another way? This is exactly what the Mikado approach brings. And for you to don't, I'm not familiar with the name. Mikado is like a game. Some people might also know it as the pick up the stick. And the idea of the game is that you get all the sticks and you throw them in a way. And what you need to do is that you need to be able to remove a stick without moving any of the other ones. And the process here is about you kind of look at the problem and you see what are the parts that I can remove, what are the sticks that I can remove that doesn't touch all the mess that I'm in, but that already brings me closer to the goal that I have. And this is exactly, the Mikado approach follows like the same idea. Is about understanding how I can make changes to my code, the minimum changes that are possible, so that I know that I am progressing further towards the scenario that I want, towards the main goal that I want to change. And this was a reminder for me to go to ScaliDraw so that we can, oh, where's the thing? So that we can do this here. So the Mikado approach, one of the things that you do with the Mikado approach is that you have a graph. And one of the fun things is that you end up documenting what are the steps that you're taking when you're doing the Mikado approach. Normally, when you're drawing your graph, you just do this, like you put the main goal that you're trying to achieve, like in a double circle like this. And the first step of the Mikado approach when you're coding, and you're of course using like Git, you're doing some kind of solution for sourcing your code. And the first thing to do is that you try to make the most naive change possible towards the thing that you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to update a dependency, for example, what you do like straight away is like go there, update the dependency, and then you see what it is that breaks. Okay. So you update the thing in a very naive way, and you see what it is that breaks. And when you have a list, when you see it might be like a file that didn't compile properly, it needs to be like some function that got removed. What you need to take note is that of what are those changes that happen? What are the changes that you will need to make again? What are the changes that you need to make after the first change that you have just reached? So you made the first change, you identified what are the next steps that you have to do. So I'm going to draw this arrows over here, and this is like signifying that I tried changing the first thing, and then I realized, oh, in order to change the first thing, I need to make 2 more changes. Now, here's come the part that is a bit counterintuitive of the Mikado approach. So you had changed your code. You had made actual code changes in order to find out about what are the next issues that you'd have to solve. And what the Mikado approach preaches, and I preach as well, is that this, after you identified what are the next steps, what you need to do is completely remove, completely throw away all the changes that you've made so far. And you throw away all the changes and you go back to that green state, like your application is working. It's working again, it's as you started, but now you have more information about what you need to change in order to reach your overall goal. So from this place of a completely clean environment, as you had before you started your main goal, you pick one of the changes, one of the other things that you need to do that you've identified, and you try to change them instead. So what you're going to do here is that I try to make the first change. And then it's quite possible, once again, that once I try to make the first change, I realize that, oh, wait, when I make that change, I actually might need another thing that happens. So now I have it like this. So I've recognized that in order for me to make this change, I need to change another thing as well. And once again, in the Mikado approach, when you recognize that, oh, I need to change something else, what you do is that you throw away all the changes that you've done so far. You throw away the first change, you had already thrown away like the main goal that we had before, and you go back to your original green field, tests are passing, everything is compiling nicely, and you're back to that state. And now you have two options here of, okay, what am I going to try to change? I'm going to try to go for this one, the third one, or the second one. Let's say that I go for the third one. Then I try from my green environment, from everything tests are passing, I try to make this change. And then, as luck will have it, eventually I'm going to reach, I found out that for this third change, this actually works. It's something that, it's a change that I can make. And it's a change that I can make. Then I ask myself, hey, this change that I made here, does it make sense? Is this something that is done properly? Is it like the way that it should be? And if I think that, yes, this makes sense, then I go ahead and I commit this change. So now this is committed. This changed the way, this really changed the code. I committed the code to the, I committed to the repository that I'm working on. And now, but once again, I'm in a green environment. It's not as the original one was, but this is on a step. This is a step that is progress. If it was in the Mikado game, this would be like the action of you finding what was one of the sticks that you could move in isolation of the other ones, and then going ahead and very carefully taking that one out. And after you do this, what do you do next? You take a look at what are the other leaves that you have. Like if you see this as a graph, then you see that there are some elements in the graph that they do not have anyone else connected to them, any outwards facing arrow. In this case, as I have already done the third change, then the first one doesn't need anything, but it's possible that, okay, let's try to do the first one again. And then as I try to do the first one, then I recognize that, oh no, wait, now there's another thing that popped up. Actually, there's a fourth change that I need to do. And then I can go ahead, okay, let's do the fourth change, but then in the process of doing the fourth change, then there's a fifth change, and then I'm always reverting. The only thing, as I'm doing this exploratory process, the only thing that I have changed so far, that I've committed really, is this third change here. This was something that I did in isolation, that can already merge, can already maybe release. It was a change that made sense in isolation and is a stepping stone towards what I want. So I got to this fifth change here. Let's say that, yeah, this works. So now I commit this as well. Then I go try the fourth one again. Let's say that, yeah, this works now. I'm able to do it. And the first change, I try it again. And then, oh no, that actually didn't work yet. Then I actually find out that there is yet another change that needs to be done. So I connect this. Now for a change. Now I have this 3 that still needs to be done, the 1, the 2, and the 6th. Then let's say that I try, for example, just to make things different, I tried the second one, and then I realized, oh wait, the second one actually also requires the 6th one for me to be able to change it. So in this way, I identified there, revert everything, like I've already committed before, the 5th, the 4th, the 3rd. So now I'm in this ones, and I will try again the 6th one. Let's say that this also like works neatly, works. So I commit this thing, then I go back into the 1st and the 2nd. Let's say that the first one also works, and the second one, just to make things, just to put things over there, I have, let's say that there's a 7th and an 8th that get connected like this. So you got the idea. What this did is a very pragmatic way that you are trying to, one stick at a time, untangle yourself from whatever mess you find yourself in, and move and progress towards the goal that you want, until eventually you're going to see that, yeah, indeed, it looks like now the ideal scenario is that when you see the main goal, the main thing that you're trying to change in the first place, after you've done all the other changes, maybe it's that process of updating the dependency that becomes straightforward. Maybe it's removing a module that was being misused before, that now you can simply go ahead and do the thing, and you notice that nothing else breaks because you've already taken care, like one step at a time, as you have your Mikado game, taking one stick at a time, making sure that whenever you take a stick, things are still like working fine, and untangling from that mess that you were finding yourself before. Yeah, this here is like the main process. This is and the cool thing is, after you've done it, you're going to have like this visual representation of what it is that you had to change. Maybe it's something that you can even put together like in a pull request, like show what was the things that you tried to show, like how complicated a specific task was, like to achieve. And it's cool, and it's nice that it helps you really visualize what you're trying to achieve and the steps to get there. Cool. This is the little part about the Xcali draw. So I recommend the tool. It's like pretty cool for you to do this kind of graphs. Now, when you go back into the Mikado here, let's take a look of what is the, now that we've seen in the Xcali draw, let's see a little diagram of what is really the process of the Mikado method. So again, first thing is that you draw what is the Mikado goal. Then in a naive way, you just implement the thing. Then you see, are there any errors? Is there anything that is going wrong in there? I see that we lost the Mindvalley people right now. Gui, can you just confirm that we still have them with us, folks?
Yes, they are still there.
Cool. Okay. So after you see if there is any errors, then you find out what are the changes that you'd have to make. You draw the solutions, these changes that you have to make as new prerequisites. This was us like adding the other circles into Xcali draw, reverting the changes so that we have once again that green environment that is easier for us to make the changes. And then you select what is the next and you select what is the next prerequisite that you're going to work for. This was just us gathering information. And then after you gather the information, you go for one of the leaves that you have. Then you implement like the prerequisite that would be one of the leaves. And then you see, are there errors? If there are not any errors, then you see, hey, does this change that I've just did actually make sense? If it does make sense, then you commit the changes. And you just ask yourself, hey, was this the Mikado goal? Is it met or not? And then you can keep going. Now, what are some of the benefits of this? One of the benefits, the highest benefit, I would say, of the Mikado approach is that most of the time, you're going to be working on an application that you're going to be coding on a state that is working. So you try to stay away from, you try to not build up on this mass that one thing depends on the other, and that you lose the information, or you're even guessing whether you will, or if it will all work in the end, because you're making these incremental steps. You're finding what are the sticks that you can move in isolation. And once you find that stick, then you know that the code that you're going to go is for that part in particular. You don't have to take care of the entire environment at the same time, of the entire issue at the same time. You're just going for that specific part. This goes really well together with TDD, for example. Another part is that you can pause the process on like a peaceful mind. It's not like you cannot give up. You don't get to that point that you need to give up on all the changes that you've done so far. No, because at any time you have, as you progress, you will find the sticks that you can remove in isolation. And when you remove a stick, it's as if you have saved your progress. You know that after the commit is made, okay, this is something that I really want to commit for. So I can pause, even if I haven't achieved my main goal yet. It's a very neat way that I know that I can pause and I can continue afterwards. I have my visual aid that can even help me like regaining the context of what are the changes that I have done so far, and what would be a good way for me to go back into working on this task that I've left behind. And the simple process of creating this graph and seeing how the different changes are being related to one another, finding there's maybe like one change that you see that there's lots of dependence on, it may induce like eureka moments, like this enlightenment moments that you see, maybe it could be in a completely different way. But then you don't need to throw away all the work, because the work that you have committed so far is work that you have recognized that it made sense in isolation. It's the sticks that you took out of the Mikado, they made sense for you to take them out. They were the steps in the progress that you took towards your main goal. So very hardly you're going to have to bring to cancel the changes that you have already committed to. Yeah. So this is like really the Mikado method. The way that I came across the Mikado method, very similarly to what I am describing to you folks right now, was in also a meetup, like back in Germany. And it was something that at the moment, when I first got to me, it was like very simple. And so, that makes sense. And the process really is very simple. It's just a shift a bit in the order that you are doing the development, in the order that you create your commits, and when you decide that something really, how to progress with your work. Many times, I just keep this idea of the Mikado of try to work from a clear environment, giving up on the changes that I made so far, because I have found out that, hey, there's another thing that I need to do as well. Let's revert these changes and do that thing first. This process, even if you don't build a graph, just the process of, okay, I've tried changing something, stuff broke, let me revert what I've changed and fix the stuff that I know that will break. This is really empowering. This brings a lot of ease, a lot of peace of spirit to the development process. And as I like TDD, this goes really, really well with TDD, with test-driven development as well. So this is the Mikado method. I have some other stuff like prepared for because I know that this is the Ruby and the Elixir like meetup. I wanted to check with you, Gui. How are we on time right now?
Yeah, we are good. I think you can share more. Actually, we still have a lot of time.
Yeah. What I would like to share extra here is like a bonus that is one lesson. Like one of the tasks that I was taking that I used, like the Mikado approach, was when we were updating a lot of Elixir, of Phoenix templates from LEEX to HEEX, from leaks to HEEX. And there was one lesson that really stood as something that was very worthwhile remembering, just about how HEEX works in general. And what happened is that what you see in the first, like we need to take care when we're changing attributes that are evaluated to booleans or nil. So what you see in the first little code block is exactly what I had at the time. That is, you have some HTML attribute that you were using Elixir interpolation inside of a HTML tag that was evaluating to, in my case, like a boolean. So that at list has more would evaluate to true, and then what I would expect that this was render was that in the end I would have my div and the data has more equal to true. And what I did, and it took me a while to actually understand, was that when you that it's a little detail that if you do this, if you feel tempted to simply update to the new syntax of Hex syntax, because Hex has like this different syntax for templates for interpolation inside of HTML attributes, you might feel tempted to do something like this. That is just to use the curly braces over there. And this is correct syntax. But what happens is that this will probably not render the HTML that you expect. So if that value, the list has more, evaluates to true, it actually will render this div like this. You see that there is no value. It simply leaves the attribute in there. So when you have an attribute being attributed to an interpolated thing that just evaluates to a Boolean true, it simply leaves the attribute in there. It does not have the equal to true that sometimes was very important for my code to work properly. And the other way is that if it has false, then what Phoenix does, what a Hex engine does, is that it completely removes the attribute altogether from the DOM. So this was even worse because I was counting on the attribute to be set over there, and then all things were like things were not working at all. So why is it that this happens? And it's simple. It's straight from the docs. You see that some attributes have special meaning when you are setting them inside of HTML tags attributes. And the first of them is true. If it's true, then the attribute is rendered with no value at all. So you see the example that if you do input required is true, it's the same as input required. This was the detail that I was missing. And true, I should have just like paid more attention to the docs. And I do recommend just read the docs. It's going to save you time. And in the case that is false or new, then the attribute is not rendered at all. So this was really cool. Now the part with lists is another thing that you can also use for class attributes. It's a little shorter syntax that you can do when you have like multiple classes that you want to set using the interpolation of Hex. But we were not going into there. There were other learnings as well that I got from that, but I think that we don't need to go into that right now. So yeah, I would like to thank you, folks. What I do, once again, is that I empower tech leaders to challenge assumptions, rewrite beliefs, and discover the best version of themselves. So if you're like a tech person and you're curious, this link over here, I think that you can just book me for like a consultation. Just talk to me. I love talking to interesting people, no strings attached. Yeah. So back to you, Kui. I wonder what do you think?
Thank you, Bruno.
Thank you, folks.
So we're open for Q&A. Anyone have questions?
Yeah.
You can ask. Yeah. You can type in
Great.
the comment on YouTube. So we
Love questions, any kind.
Any questions from the floor?
Good day. So I'm Hatta. So what is the solution for this? Just curious.
For this?
Yeah. What is the solutions for this? For this codes. What in the end, what is your approach solution for this?
Okay. So what is it? Let me remember, because In this case, one of the things that you can do is that you can, I think that what I did was like using string interpolation. So you can, instead of simply put the attribute all together, make it evaluate into a string that then appears with the value. I don't remember actually right now what is that I did, but I think that was something with string interpolation with the value that then you don't set it, you don't fall into one of the special cases. Or perhaps you can even like change what do you expect from the value to be set in the attribute.
Okay.
I have
yeah,
some
there's a-
question about the Mikado approach.
Okay.
From what I understand from your explanation is that Mikado approach depends on you having understanding on what you need to do before you do it, right?
Yes, correct. You need to have a goal. You need to have like an initial goal that you're trying to reach.
Do you think like junior developers would have issues in following this approach because they might not know what they need to do?
Actually, I would say that it's quite the opposite. I think that a junior developer is going to have a great time with this approach, because in the end, when what they are going to have, they're going to have some sort of task they're trying to achieve, right? Let's say that the task, I don't know, maybe it's like add app signal instrumenting. Okay, let's see to a function, to function X. Okay, let's see that this is their task. Okay, so the first thing that they would do, like in this case, is to just go ahead and, hey, okay, let's try here naively. I don't even have app signal into my code yet. I'll just go there, look at the doc, see how is it that app signal, how I would send like a specific event to app signal from that. And then I see, okay, I just try, make the change, and then I say, oh no, wait, I cannot, because actually I need to add the dependency. Let's see, dependency, and I actually also need to, let's say, start it on the supervision tree. Okay, so the Mikado approach is what they would do then. Before, they had changed like some function to add the app signal code, but now they're going to the other way. They're going to remove that change that they did, and the process of trying to simply make the naive change led them to the discovery of what are the things that they will need to do in the future. So now they know that, okay, first I need to add the dependency, and then they go there and they try to add the dependency directly. And then they also find out, oh, wait, it looks like I need to start the thing in the supervision tree. Maybe it wouldn't be like this, the tree, but you get the point. So what do you think of that?
Okay, I'm going to add one extra question on top of this. You just shows that this can be a potential tool to mentor junior developers, as in Mikado as a tool for mentoring developers. What do you think about that?
That's I throw the question back to you. Like, what do you think that how could the Mikado approach be used as a tool for mentoring developers?
Now, let's go back to this scenario you have, right? These junior developers have to have this task. Now, the question then is they discover all these things. Those are learnings. Which is the goal of mentoring. But the thing is, a junior developer may underestimate one of those things. Us as a senior engineer have to go in, refine the approach again, then they discovered more and more and more. So from this, then you essentially, each of the things they discovered along the way together or alone is a task they had to learn along the way, which goes to the main goal. It's a tool for mentoring.
Absolutely. I think that, yeah, when you put it like this, is really powerful. And I would like to even like go a step further and say how when you do the Mikado approach, you can do it in different levels. It's possible that you have like a project that is touching like multiple teams, let's say. or let's take to the same code base. It's possible that simply one of these things is really complicated. Like adding a dependency is a really not adding a dependency, but let's say that let's say that there's yet a third thing that is here, like really complicated. And then what you could do is for this really complicated thing, you could do like a Mikado thing on itself, like take this really complicated thing as Mikado in itself. Because when you see, if you simply take it, it would be as if you had like called this as like the main thing that you're trying to do. And then you could like just take this out and have like a completely separate Mikado approach just to do that thing in isolation from the original goal that you're trying to achieve. Or you can go inside and create a Mikado inside of for that specific task. But the point here is that you are always moving in a way that you identify what are the changes that you can make in isolation, the smallest changes that you can make in isolation, so that you're getting progress and going back to the green state, to your tests passing, to your work environment being nice. And yeah, as a mentoring tool, this is really cool. Like simply being able to visualize together with the person that you're mentoring, what are the activities that they did, and just picturing like, hey, what did you learn from each one of them? Yeah, this is really powerful.
So what's the desired outcome of following Mikado approach? Is it just better commits or?
Yeah, so the desired outcome, the thing that we want is that you are going to stress yourself less. Okay, so we can even put this here. Like, what are the desired outcomes? Smaller changes, incremental changes. This is one of them, smaller incremental changes. And there is progress without the mess. Okay, and the one that I say that is really important is this of you can pause the process on a peaceful mind, that I also like a lot. But these are some of the benefits. Do you recognize other benefits as well?
Making commits easier to review.
Very true. Commits are easier to review. Exactly, because the commits are not going to be like a lot of stuff at the same time, but rather it's just that one stick that you're taking out at a time. Easier to review. Commits. Huh? Let's go. And like I said, this is a good thing to have in mind. And once the Mikado approach clicks in your head, it's something that even if you're not building the graphs, just seeing when you make one change and then like two things break, then you say like, oh, wait a bit. Maybe I'm better off reverting things and taking care of those things that I know that will break instead of building on top of the thing that is already broken. Because this is what you might feel the urge to. Okay, I'm in a broken state. In order to continue working, I need to fix those things and I'll be able to go back to what I was broken in the first place and continue progressing. But then you didn't even verify properly. You didn't have like a proper green environment to test those two first changes that you made. So yeah, smaller incremental changes, progress without the mess, easier to review commits. Cool. Curious, any other questions?
Yep, I guess
Nope.
That's it. So thank you, Bruno, for sharing. And we'll move to the next talk.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And once again, I'm not sure if this is something. The other day I caught myself like not knowing how I'm going to create a QR code. out of something, and I was like quite happy when I saw that you can just like right click anywhere. You can create a QR code for the page, and then you just get the QR code over there. This is like pretty nifty. This is Google Chrome. It just allows you to do this, and I like the dinosaur. That's cool. Thank you, folks. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Bruno. Next, we'll bring Wyan to talk. Hi, Wyan. I think you are muted. Yeah, you can turn on. Yeah.
Hello.
So next, a multiple intelligence approach to Polyglot programming.
Yes. Just to preempt you guys, the title looks very complicated, but it's not as complicated when we go through this sharing. You will see that this is basically my summary of my experience learning Elixir and how it's useful the knowledge we learn from Elixir, it is also applicable to other languages as well. And especially that's especially true for me. I'm coming from a Ruby background. So a little background of myself, if some of you guys don't know about me. I have started learning Ruby on Rails at 2013, and I started my full-time job as a Rails developer eventually. And throughout these years, I have learned to work with various technologies, jQuery, React, which is ES6. I even work on Node.js projects. I also started working on some legacy frameworks such as AngularJS when I joined Hivekind since last year. And we do have a code base that deals with Rust too. So I can share with you my experience of learning from multiple languages. And today I want to give my focus on Elixir, which is the main topic that I'm going to share to you today. So talking about learning Elixir, I've started learning Elixir when a few years ago when I was actually interested to learn Elixir. When I saw that there's this agency called Half Rocket, they created this platform named Today I Learn, which is a very good website. Even me myself is very I check on their websites from time to time to get some tips on the programming from the day-to-day programming practices. And I found out that Elixir is actually pretty interesting. So I just did a very simple experimentation by deploying it to Heroku. I did some very small bootstrapping. For example, creating a new Elixir app, doing the mix dapsget, which is to install the dependency, and starting the web server, which is the Phoenix server. But I actually didn't progress much after that because I don't have a use case to use Elixir back then. But I get actively using Elixir since last year because of the work that I've been involving in, which is a bug that I saw from our front end application, which is using React, and that bug is actually happening on the backend. So I have to check on a backend service that hosts the API that returns the data needed for the front end. So that API is built using Elixir Phoenix. And that time I wasn't very familiar with Elixir. So what I did is just trying to trace through the function calls from our error logging app, which is Honeybadger. There is a stack trace, so I basically just follow through the stack trace and see where the error came from and do some very rough guess from there. And that's it for the bug. So I couldn't make it work. The issue still haven't resolved till today. So there is a developer from that project which was actively working on that project. He couldn't find it either, so I actually forgiven that and move on. But eventually that developer also resigned from that project, and our team at Hivekind, we are taking over these projects from him. And that's the time that kind of forces myself to start learning Elixir, because I also want to learn Elixir. This is my main motivation, and I feel interested to learn more about Elixir. And eventually I volunteer myself to take over that developer's work, which he has completed, but he haven't deployed to production yet during the time. So we taken over the dev's work, and I basically learn Elixir from there actively by start reviewing his code, because he created a code review in the GitLab, and we have a code review. And from there, I try to understand all the code changes, because we are responsible for deploying. So after deploying it, we will need some space to make sure that there is no error happens after deployment. And if there is any error, we will need to handle it. So to be safe, I try to understand every changes about that work, and at least I know where to find out about the issue when something goes wrong. So and to learn about those changes, I actually put out a lot of effort from there. I basically got myself a book to read, which is called Elixir in Action. I signed up for an online course in Udemy. So from the course, I actually learned a lot of the basics of Elixir, and basically trying to compare Elixir against Ruby. So I try to create a small GIS for myself to compare the difference between Elixir and Ruby, and what is not available in Ruby but available in Elixir. And after that I realized that actually learning from online courses and book actually helps a lot. By knowing the basics of Elixir, it actually makes me able to access most of the code base, and that makes me feel a lot easier to navigate through the code base after learning through. And that's the time that I finally understand that Elixir is not so much similar to Ruby. It's actually a very completely different language compared to Ruby, and there's so much more other than the difference being a functional programming language versus a OOP language. So yeah, the confidence isn't enough for me to just deploy even after learning Elixir. But knowing that there are some people that I can go to within our team, we have a few seniors here who knows Elixir, so I am very confident that I can find them for help in case something goes wrong too. So that makes me feel confident to finally release that feature to production. And that actually, so error eventually came. So we had a few issues after the deployment. We even get paged from some issues, but it's very lucky that I managed to get help from senior, and he helped me to get through this OTP from this OTP related issue, which is related to the concurrency of how we create new processes to handle the transactions, handle the Kafka events. So yeah, so that is actually involving Gen server and supervisor and dynamic supervisor, and those are the things that I am still not familiar. So I'm glad that someone is familiar with that. So I feel lucky to learn from there, and I slowly learn from I slowly learned through this and slowly getting familiar with gen server and supervisor, what they does. And I can see how powerful they are by monitoring the processes every day for the errors and in implementing the new features. So the knowledge we get from here, we actually apply it by creating a new project that that is being handled by our team that we built for our client, and that is a project that we built to serve the ads to be rendered for the client's website. So, and I've actually learned a lot more from there, a lot more patterns. What are the best way to build features or fix for bug fixes in Elixir? And I find that there are some common patterns that compared to Ruby, but there are some very different aspects of Elixir that is not available in Ruby too. So the next thing I'm going to share is the great things in Elixir, which I mentioned just now. That those are the things that are available in Elixir, but it's not available in Ruby or not fully available in Ruby. So the first thing I realized is there's a type checking in Elixir, and that's actually very helpful in building error-free code bases. And that actually reminds me of TypeScript. They actually looks quite similar. Let me share my screen maybe to make this more solid. Okay.
Are you able to share the screens? Yeah, I didn't see it yet.
I'm still finding the screen to share.
Okay.
So yep. So what I found interesting from Elixir is we have type checking. We also have a type called struct, and I find it very
I think you
useful to
need to
define
zoom it
objects.
in. It's too small in the attendance in the venue cannot see. I think
Is
you
it?
need to zoom more.
Is it big?
Yeah, it still need more. I think it's still a bit more. Still need to plus. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it should be good.
Yep. Yeah, this is one thing I find interesting in Elixir, and this works a little bit like our Ruby, plain old Ruby object Poro. Basically, we've defined one class for Ruby, and in Elixir, we only need to define a struct with its attributes inside there. But by defining the attributes, we will need to define the types as well. Which in here is a module. The module is the classes here, so-called classes. Yeah, function name, the result key, the params, which is the map. A map is basically a hash in Ruby. The headers, which is basically an array of maps. We also have pattern matching. For people who coming from Ruby background, I think this might looks a little bit confusing because we have two function definitions for a type 4 here. We have two function definitions for distribution type here. We also have a few function definitions for status 4 here, even for the add stream number here. So this is not a bug. This is what we call the pattern matching in Elixir, which I think is the most interesting feature in Elixir that I hope that it works in Ruby. So yeah, what basically does is when we call this function with the parameter which is exactly equals to sponsor listing here, we will return this atom, which is basically the symbol in Ruby. Same for this. If it's display, then we will return this display. But it is because we are very sure that the add type 4 only accepts either of these. So there are some cases you will need to define a catch-all for this params and do error, something like this. And pattern matching not only works for parameters, it works for maps too. I find it very interesting, which is similar like this. And it looks very familiar on the first sight because it looks very similar to what I've been dealing with in E6 from day-to-day programming. And another one that I find it interesting is in Elixir, many times we define the status of the project based on this tuple, and this tuple consists of this status called OK, or another one is called error. And this makes it even safer for our error catching, because now we can expect, if it's error, we can expect this will return an error message or something like that. And if it's okay, we will deal with what is being returned by the second parameter, the second element of the tuple. And I think this is very different from what we normally deal with in Ruby. Normally in Ruby, we only define if status equals to true, then we will do if else statement. And I find that the use of if else statement is actually used very sparingly in Elixir. And there's definitely a lot more lesser of dealing with new case in Ruby. Yep. And of course this is what we call the pipelining or piping. Yeah. Basically what we do is we inject the outcome, the result of this into this function as the first parameter, etc. So the outcome, the result of this, the return value of this will be injected in as a first parameter of stream.map. And this is how we deal with the piping. And I find it very interesting because this actually motivates me to create a lot more functions, and I understand what is atomicity now, which means each function has only one responsibility. And I find it very easy to enforce this practice in Elixir and Ruby, and it makes it a lot more flexible to move around the code. So you can basically see this as Lego blocks, which has been frequently mentioned in everywhere. Yep. Okay. And previously we've mentioned about this thing called Gen server. We have our event. The event processor is a Kafka event consumer that takes in that consumes a Kafka event and process it. And what an engine does is basically updates the ads info and a few other operations that updates the data into our database. So what Gen server does here is basically to fork out a separate process to process this particular event. So each event will basically being processed by one separate process, which is very different from Ruby basically, because from Ruby, for example, we consume a Kafka event, if we don't carve up any concurrent processing from there, we will basically need to process them sequentially. And I find that it's not very common to use concurrency in Ruby, even though it's actually readily available as a gem. And what we have here, we also have supervisor. To manage the status of our processes. So one thing I learned from Elixir is also one of the main thing that Elixir, the OTP highlights is that it's okay to let the process fails, but after failure, of course, we will need to get the supervisor to see that the process has failed, and the supervisor will help to restart the process. And this is very helpful for some processes that relies on the process that relies on a lot of stability. You will need supervisor to make sure that all the processes, for example, our Kafka events, are being processed eventually. Okay. There is this interesting thing about Elixir is this is a Phoenix framework, and within this Phoenix framework, we're actually using this feature called Umbrella. So in Rails app, when you create one new app, it is one new app. But in Elixir, there is this concept called Umbrella. So when you create one Umbrella Elixir project, they basically allow you to create multiple apps within this umbrella. So we make use of this umbrella to separate the concerns between the components that we implement. For example, we have this for backend processing. We have the adswef, basically it's for some internal use, the documentation. These are basically the common modules that's being shared in our microservices. Log helpers, which solely means to format our log into a very readable format for our logging services, which is Greylog. Olympian, this is a very heavy. This is a very logic-centric, heavy calculation module, and Quasi's target is our API client. So they all have their own responsibility as well. So we separate them into each app. Of course, it has some challenges there, but that's not covered in the topic for today. Okay. So previously, I have also mentioned about Elixir, and I find that the documentation in Elixir is actually very good compared to Ruby. I'm not sure because this is based on my personal experience using Ruby. I tend to visit Stack Overflow a lot for Ruby related issues, but for Elixir, surprisingly, what I need to do is to refer to the API first and go to the Elixir forum whenever I have any question that came on and then that's not available in the internet. This is the Elixir forum that I think is very active. We have a very active community here. And the Elixir documentation is very, very good. It's basically a combination of API references as well as the guides of using Elixir. For example, the guides of creating the umbrella project. So and if you're wondering how the documentation are created is, so these are actually available directly from the code base. All we need to do is to define a dot meta here and do some comments from there, and we can actually run some what they call doc tests, which basically means you only need to create the test cases here, and they will run for you when you run the test suite. This is the documentation of Phoenix, and I think I have context. So this is one of the documentation example that I find very helpful for the Phoenix context. By context is basically a further down modularization from the umbrella apps that we have I've shown to you guys earlier on. So yeah, so they even talk about the design, basically how you want to use the for context and what are the best use case of it. So so back to the file structure here, you can find that the file structure in Elixir app is actually pretty flexible compared to Ruby. In Ruby, basically everything is preloaded. I mean Rails, sorry. In Rails, we are basically preloading everything before the Rails server starts. But for Elixir, what you need is basically to define import in each of the module for the modules that you want to use. So I'm not sure if we have any use case here, but yeah, we do have those imports and aliases around. And I find it reduces a lot of loading speed in Elixir. In Elixir IEX. IEX is similar to what we have in Elixir Ruby IRB. So yep. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is what does it mean to learn Elixir and know about a lot of languages, which is basically the main point I want to share today. So after learning a few languages from Ruby on Rails and JavaScript from multiple frameworks using ES5, ES6, and now Elixir, also deal a little bit with Rust for some maintenance work. I find that it is actually not that hard to transition from one language to another language, at least for the first 20% base knowledge of the language. And you only need that 20% of knowledge for the remaining 80% of the day-to-day work that you're exposed to. So the remaining 20% is something that you need to actively work on to find out what are the differences, what are so special in each of the language that make them being the language that's being implemented. So, for example, you can see that there is a lot of shadowing of Elixir. I think it's inspiration. So a lot of inspiration that Elixir and Phoenix is created from is basically based on the experience using Ruby on Rails. So they are taking the best practices from Ruby on Rails and knowing the pain points, and basically they create alternate solutions to solve for the pain points in Ruby on Rails. For example, the speed, the memory requirements. The memory requirements in Elixir is actually very low. And Elixir is basically a one level a high level language that's built that's built upon Erlang. So, and Erlang is a very it's a very it's a very military proven that kind of technology, and they are actually they are created by the engineers at Ericsson many years ago. So the concurrency is basically their main selling point, which is different from Ruby on Rails. From Ruby on Rails, I think their main so-called selling point is that they are easy to get started with, easy to prototype new apps. But when it comes to concurrency, speed, and memory consumption, I would say Elixir, with the help of Phoenix, it really helps a lot in that case, especially the concurrency part, because they have a gen server and supervisor to manage the concurrency and to basically to use lesser memory and do more things at the same time compared to Ruby on Rails. So, but that also doesn't mean that I'm going to stick to Elixir for the rest of my life. It's not that case, because we know that technology changes from day to day. What I've learned is taking the common patterns I see from different languages. For example, the pattern matching that I mentioned earlier on, I actually learned that from JavaScript, and I managed to find it reducing a lot of learning curve for Elixir, because I'm used to the JavaScript spreading and splitting operators. So pattern matching is not that hard for me to get used to for now. And the use of the use of, for example, the snack case, the aliases, the imports, the structuring of the folder, they are all very similar to JavaScript, which is very flexible. But it also gives a lot of similarities that I see from Rails, which is in Phoenix we still have rig tasks. We call it mixed tasks in Elixir. We still have the mixed routes, which is rig routes. We still have migrations. We still have basically the controller and the view model. The view model is basically the Higgs, the live view that you've seen earlier on. We still have controllers, which is very similar to Ruby on Rails as well. Maybe one thing is different, which is the model part, because in Phoenix we use Ecto. Ecto is not a very strictly active record pattern. They are using a very different pattern, and the Ecto actually leverages its usage using this context that I've shown you guys earlier on. And I find that the atomicity actually helps a lot in terms of the maintenance and the ease of adding new features, or even easier to track out the bugs. So this is what I learned from dealing with JavaScript, with Ruby, and I found out these common patterns in Elixir. So you can see that we can see these common patterns being used in multiple languages. So that means it's actually not very hard to get started in another languages, as long as we have this base knowledge in place. So yep. So I think these are the points that I have that I want to present today. Thank you.
That's good. Thank you, Ryan. We have a comment in our comment section, so let's see it. So, Bruno said that
Yeah.
be careful with umbrellas.
So there is a very strong debate between using umbrella or not using umbrella. So we're still kind of new to Elixir, so we are still experimenting it in differently compared to our previous projects, which we have not used umbrella very actively. So there are challenges of using umbrellas. I agree, especially in terms of the DevOps side of things, because we are using Docker. So we basically need to copy over each of the mix file and need to manage them over time if we create new apps. Yeah. But so far, the Elixir project that we've been doing is actually quite stable. So we don't see a stopper of using umbrella, but you definitely have to be careful of using that.
Sounds good. Any questions from the floor or anyone watching YouTube can send in your questions.
If a person just started out learning about programming, would you ask them to go for Elixir or Ruby?
I would recommend them to get started with Ruby first or Python. It's not hard to get started in Elixir, but I would say the community is not as beginner friendly as Ruby on Rails and Python. And I feel like Elixir is more to seasoned developers where they know where they need to find information and they know what they need to search for in Google. Yeah.
What about frameworks? Like, would you ask them to go for Rails first or Phoenix first?
Rails first. It depends on their familiarity with programming paradigms. If someone is more familiar with functional programming, I would say Elixir is not a bad option. But most of the time, our mind basically being processed procedurally, and that's not something that's easy to access in functional programming. So I would say in that case, Ruby on Rails might be a better option. Yeah. I actually have a few questions from my previous employer. So they actually have an app using Elixir, and they are actively using the Shopify library in Elixir. So, and they find that it's actually not very actively maintained as the Ruby side of things, because Shopify is basically based upon Ruby on Rails technology. So my view of that is, yeah, I have to agree that the Ruby community seems to be more active in terms of some libraries. For example, they are Shopify library, but it doesn't mean it's not That doesn't mean it's impossible to continue using Elixir, because you can actively maintain that package by forking it out. And if you have a good programming practice, you basically need to fix it for 1 or 2 times, because I don't see the Shopify library changes very often. So as long as your code base is stable, you don't need to do very frequent changes. And over time, it's actually quite stable to use unless they started introducing major changes. Yeah.
Another question. How would you compare the ease of use between Rails and Phoenix?
I think it's still back to the mindset of our normal developer mindset, which is more procedural. I would say from there, I can say the Ruby on Rails is still easier, and you can see that we can release out Ruby on Rails features, bug fixes, and also we can release those changes fairly quickly at first, but over time, when tech debt starts building up, it's actually slowing us down in terms of development time. So yes, to get started is definitely Rails, but in terms of maintenance and best practices, I would say Elixir is doing a better job. But it doesn't mean Elixir is not good. I mean, it doesn't mean Ruby on Rails is not good. It's just that because of the freedom that procedural, OOP, and functional that Ruby on Rails gives you, it tends each person's programming style tends to vary a lot more. So that tends to introduce different kind of challenges over time.
Any more
Hi.
questions? From the floor?
Question on testing. How easy is it to get to like doing a TDD style in Elixir versus, I mean, compared with your experience in Rails?
To preempt you, I have not been actively using TDD, even though I create test cases. I feel like the ease of use is the experience of creating test cases in Elixir is actually better than Rails. The reason is because of the preloading that happens, because in Rails you can see you need a Rails helper, and you need to define what are the libraries you want to load and the configurations needed. For Elixir, this is defined module by module. So you don't need to preload everything at first when the test being started. And it's actually being compiled in terms of before the test starts. So the test actually runs pretty quickly. The feedback loop actually comes quite quickly compared to Rails. So in Rails, every time you run a test, you're basically preloading the entire library and run the entire script each time. But in Elixir, the script is pretty much compiled. It's just that yeah, you just need to the feedback loop is actually very quick in Elixir. Yeah.
Hatta here. In your opinion, what are the what are the hardest part of Elixir? I mean, what are the most challenges? What is the most challenging part when you learn Elixir? And how you overcome it? Yeah.
I think it's to simulate the concurrency in my local environment. I'm not sure if that's a good answer, but yeah. So as I mentioned there earlier on, there is this issue at a project that I've taken on from the previous developer. So one of these issues is about the concurrency, and how that concurrency works is we define a key of the process. So the issue is actually very tricky, and I couldn't find a way to debug it because it's a very subtle issue. And I just find it hard to simulate this issue in my local environment, and I wouldn't say I totally overcome it, but I'm still learning the whole gen server thing. So I hope that I can find a good way to learn gen server, the concurrency in Elixir over time. But the other thing is, I think, is that in Elixir there is this feature called Observer. It's from Erlang, and I think that's a very good tool to monitor your supervisor and gen server processes. And what's challenging is setting up is actually quite challenging in my computer. I'm not sure whether it's a Mac OS specific issue or something else. So in very specific case like this, the community might not be able to help you fully. So you need to be very knowledgeable in Linux and maybe find other ways to make it work eventually. For example, the use of Docker. Yeah.
More question?
More comment,
Yep,
because every time you create a server, those things is always hard. Concurrency is hard for everyone. Okay, that's given. We never solve that problem. I can tell you that. So don't beat yourself out. Especially when you actually spin up your own processes to actually run multiple processes. Nobody can get it run all the time, consistently. I know for sure. Seriously.
Yes.
Yep. I guess we have comment from the comment section YouTube. Show it. So yeah, Ruby or Rails is a big enough then that you can do both OP and also functional. It's up to you. And yeah, you can't say the same for Elixir.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I guess for Ruby there's also Hanami and functional programming like Rhoda framework also. For just now you mentioned about the pattern matching on functions. Will that be identical to duck typing in Python and also Ruby? Because that will also somehow fulfill the needs of pattern matching.
I won't say duck typing. A side note is actually a pattern matching is actually partially available in Ruby 3.0. It's not very similar to what we have in Elixir, but somehow the pattern matching is somehow available within a function, not like in terms of the parameter pattern matching. So I hope there's more into that for on the Ruby side. But in terms of duck typing, because Elixir is not an OOP, so I don't see the duck typing on that. But yeah, but I can see why, because you basically depends on the parameter and you decide what to do about that. I think basically that's a if else statement. Basically back to the base of our programming knowledge earlier on. It's basically if and else statement. You find that it matches this statement, so it goes to this execution. Yeah. So if it's not only if and else, it's multiple conditions, and what to do when this condition is not met, and that's basically what we have in exception catching in Ruby. Yeah.
Yep, sounds good. Any more questions from the floor? Else we will continue to our next part. Shout outs. I think Mindvalley have shout outs, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, thank you, Wayne, for the talk. Mindvalley. Shout outs. Hiring shout outs. Anything parking lots. So means anything that you want to share.
Yeah, can you share the Mindvalley careers page?
Yep.
Yeah.
Need to zoom.
Yeah, Mindvalley is hiring. What is the code there? Yeah, we are hiring Elixir developer, front-end developer, Android developer. If you have any friend to recommend, do so.
Okay, sounds good.
Any more shout-outs?
Any more shout-outs? Anyone hiring? Anyone? Yeah, if anyone interested, you can join the Slack group. Often we will have hiring shout-outs in our Slack and also Facebook group. So yeah, do check those out. If that's all, I guess we can wrap things up. Thank you everyone for being here. See you in the next meetup. Thank you.
Yay!